My dear child, I am laughing right now. And the reason I am laughing is because the people who buried you had no idea they were planting the very thing they were trying to destroy. Do not scroll past this. What I am about to reveal will permanently rewrite the story you have been telling yourself about what was done to you. They pressed you down. They covered you over. They packed the soil with their own hands and walked away certain that the darkness they placed you in was the last chapter of a story they wanted finished. They did not know you were a seed, and I have been laughing ever since. A seed does not die when it is buried. That is the fact that undoes everything your enemies intended. The darkness they meant as a grave is the exact environment a seed requires to crack open and release what was always locked inside it. The weight they pressed on top of you, the weight they calculated as sufficient to keep you down permanently, is the exact pressure a seed needs to push its roots deeper and its shoot upward through the surface with a force that the hands which buried it could never contain. They buried you to end you, my beloved child. They activated you instead. I know you have been living in the soil. I know the darkness has been real. I know the weight above you has been pressing against your back with a force that made you question whether the people who put you there were right about where you belong. You have been surviving the burial, but you have not yet understood what the burial has actually been doing to the seed they did not know they were handling. The seed is cracking open right now, and what is emerging will be the very thing your buriers feared most. Stay here. What I reveal next is what has been happening inside you during the burial, and why the darkness did exactly what it was designed to do. Type planted, not buried, if people deliberately tried to end your relevance and push you into darkness. And God just told you they did not bury a person. They planted a seed, and the seed is about to become exactly what they feared. Before we go further, I need to tell you something that genuinely surprised me. A neuroscientist discovered a simple 7-second technique that actually rewires how your brain processes thoughts. And when I tried it, the difference was almost unsettling. My focus sharpened, ideas started connecting faster, and that mental fog gone. This isn't manifestation nonsense. It's backed by real brain science, and thousands of people are already seeing results. But here's the catch. Only 5 spots are left. If something inside you is saying, try it, trust that instinct, click the link in the description or pinned comment before it's too late. The seed has been doing something in the darkness that the people who buried it cannot see from the surface. And what they cannot see is about to become impossible to ignore, my beloved child. When a seed is pressed into soil, the first thing it does is not grow upward, it grows downward. Before a single visible shoot breaks the surface, the seed sends roots deep into the earth, anchoring itself in a foundation so hidden and so extensive that by the time the surface shows any evidence of life, the underground system is already massive enough to sustain something the buriers never imagined they were funding. You have been growing roots this entire time, and nobody above ground knows. I need you to understand what was happening while the people who buried you were celebrating your disappearance. They looked at the surface. They saw no movement. They concluded, as anyone who does not understand seeds would conclude, that the darkness did its job, that the weight held, that the person they pressed into the ground stayed pressed. My dear one, they mistook root growth for death, and that mistake is about to cost them everything they were trying to protect by removing you. The root system you have been developing in the dark is not small. The duration of the burial was not wasted time beneath the surface. It was the incubation period that a seed of your magnitude requires to build a root network capable of sustaining what is about to break through the soil. Quick burials produce shallow roots that support small growth. Extended burials produce deep roots that support trees. Your burial was not quick, and what is coming up is not small. This message was not sent to every person who has experienced a setback. This was aimed at the one person who was deliberately pressed into darkness by hands that wanted them gone. Hands that are still celebrating the burial on the surface, while beneath the ground the very thing they tried to destroy has been building a root system so extensive it is about to restructure the terrain they thought they owned. Type root system. If you have been growing in the dark without anyone above ground knowing it, and God just told you that the depth of your roots is proportional to the duration of the burial, and what is about to surface will restructure the terrain your enemies thought they controlled. I have been kneeling beside the soil they pressed you into since the moment their hands left the surface, my dear one. And I have been whispering to the seed the entire time the darkness thought it was winning. Not from above, from beside, my mouth against the soil, speaking directly to the casing of a seed that was cracking open in real time, while the people who buried it were walking away, brushing dirt from their hands. With the satisfied posture of people who believe they have finished something. They finished nothing. They started everything. My beloved child, I watched them bury you. I know who they are. I know the specific hands that pressed the weight down. I know the calculation behind the burial, the cold, deliberate assessment that said this person is in our way, and the measured decision to remove you, not through confrontation, but through covering. They did not fight you. They buried you. Because fighting you meant acknowledging you as an equal threat. Burying you meant dismissing you as something that could be pressed beneath relevance and forgotten. They forgot you. I did not. I watched the seed respond to the soil the moment darkness surrounded it. Not with death, with activation. The casing that had been holding everything you carry inside began softening in the moisture of the very soil your enemies selected as your grave. The darkness they intended as blindness became the incubation environment that blocked every distraction and forced the seed to focus entirely on the one thing seeds do in the dark: become. I chose you for this message because the becoming is almost complete, and the surface is about to crack. And the first visible evidence of what the burial actually produced is about to emerge in full view of the same people who packed the soil over your head and walked away certain you would never be seen again. They are about to see you, my child, and what they see will not be the person they buried. It will be the thing the person was carrying inside them that only the burial could release. Type becoming if God has been kneeling beside you in the dark whispering to the seed, while the people who buried you celebrated on the surface. And what has been becoming inside you during the burial is about to break through the soil in full view of everyone who thought the darkness was your end. I know what the soil felt like when the darkness first closed over you, my beloved child. Not the metaphorical version of darkness, the real kind. The specific, suffocating, disorienting kind that descends when people you trusted, or at least people who occupied positions of influence over your trajectory, deliberately pressed you beneath the surface of visibility. You were there one day, relevant, seen, contributing, and then hands moved against you with a coordination that felt rehearsed, and the light disappeared. The first hours of the burial were the worst, because the first hours are when you still remember what the light looked like. When the contrast between where you were and where you have been placed is so sharp that the darkness feels like a physical weight, rather than an absence of light. You reached upward during those first hours, instinctively, the way any living thing reaches toward what it was designed to exist in when the environment suddenly changes without its consent. But the soil did not yield, and your reaching produced nothing except exhaustion. My child, I watched the reaching turn to stillness. The stillness was not acceptance. It was the pause of a seed that has realized its casing is softening, that the soil it was pressed into is interacting with something inside it, in a way the seed did not expect, and the buriers did not intend. The people who buried you expected you to fight the soil or die in it. They did not calculate a third option, that the soil would activate something inside you that fighting would have prevented and dying would have wasted. You stopped fighting, and the not fighting was misread by everyone above the surface as defeat. Your silence in the soil was interpreted as confirmation that the burial worked, that the darkness won, that the person they pressed beneath relevance had accepted irrelevance as their permanent address. They misread the silence of activation as the silence of death, and that misreading is about to become the most expensive mistake they have ever made. The deepest wound of the burial was not the darkness. It was hearing them walk away, my dear child. The sound of retreating footsteps above the soil you were pressed into. The specific, crushing, impossible to unhear sound of people who put you there, turning their backs and resuming their lives, as though the burying was a task completed rather than a person erased. They did not linger. They did not look back. They did not exhibit a single tremor of conscience that would have told you the weight of what they did was registering on their awareness. They walked away light, and you stayed buried heavy. I know the isolation that followed the footsteps, not the general isolation of being alone, the targeted isolation of being beneath, below the surface where conversations happen without you, below the level where decisions are made about spaces you used to occupy, below the line of visibility that determines who matters and who has been filed underhandled. My beloved child, you heard them above you, living, advancing, filling the space you left with replacements that carried none of your depth, but all of the access your burial surrendered to them. You heard them mention your name once, briefly, dismissively, with the casual tone of people referencing something they already resolved rather than someone they deliberately destroyed. The casualness was its own wound, because casual meant they had already forgotten the gravity of what they did. And the part you have never told anyone, the part that lives in the deepest layer of soil above the seed, is that there were moments in the burial where you agreed with them, where the darkness convinced you that maybe you did belong beneath the surface. Maybe the people who pressed you down saw something accurate about your value that you had been inflating. Maybe the soil is where you were always meant to be. That agreement was the darkness speaking to the seed. And the seed does not listen to darkness. It uses it. Type uses it. If you have been in a season where the people who buried you walked away without looking back, and the darkness almost convinced you that you belonged beneath the surface until something inside you refused to agree permanently with what the soil was saying. The burial was never the act of destruction your enemies designed it to be. It was the exact agricultural process that the seed inside you required to begin producing what it was always carrying. My beloved one, I need to permanently rewrite the narrative the soil has been telling you about why you were pressed beneath the surface. The soil's version says you were removed because you were a problem, eliminated because you were inconvenient, covered because what you represented was threatening to people whose positions required your absence to remain stable. The soil is half right. You were threatening. But the burial did not neutralize the threat. It germinated it. My child, I need you to understand what happens inside a seed when soil and darkness and moisture and pressure converge on its casing simultaneously. The casing, the hard outer shell that protected everything you carry inside you, begins to soften, not weaken. Soften. The distinction matters. Weakening implies loss of structural integrity. Softening implies the controlled opening of a structure that was always designed to open but required specific environmental conditions to trigger the mechanism. The burial provided those exact conditions. The darkness they meant to blind you with became the absence of distraction that forced the seed to focus entirely on internal development. The weight they placed on top of you became the pressure that pushed your roots deeper into soil that will sustain what grows from you for decades. The isolation they engineered to cut you off from relevance became the incubation period that allowed the seed to develop without interference from the same environment that tried to destroy it. Every element of the burial that was intended as a weapon was received by the seed as a nutrient. My dear one, your enemies are terrible gardeners. They assembled the perfect growing conditions and called it a grave. They provided darkness, pressure, moisture, and isolation, the four exact elements a seed requires, and expected death. The gardener is laughing, because what they built was not a grave. It was a greenhouse. The first crack in the soil above you just appeared, and the people who buried you are about to see the first green evidence that what they pressed into the ground is coming back up. My beloved child, something is happening on the surface right now that you cannot see from your position beneath the soil, but I can see from mine above it. A hairline fracture in the packed earth. A micro-disturbance in the terrain your buriers smoothed flat after they finished the burial. A disruption so small that a casual observer would miss it entirely. But an observer who knows what seeds do would recognize it instantly as the first visible sign that the shoot has reached the underside of the surface and is pressing upward with a force the soil cannot contain. The surface is cracking, and the crack is you. I have been working beneath the soil alongside the seed during the entire burial, not as a spectator observing a natural process, as a gardener monitoring the growth rate, adjusting the moisture content, ensuring the root system anchored deep enough to sustain what the shoot is about to produce above ground. Every element of the underground development has been managed with the precision of someone who planted the seed deliberately in soil that was selected not by the buriers but by the gardener, who knew the soil they chose in anger was the exact composition the seed required. My child, they chose the soil. I approved it. And the timing of the surface crack is not accidental. The shoot has been developing for the exact duration required to produce a stem strong enough to break through packed earth without breaking itself. A shoot that emerges 2 early snaps under the weight of the surface. A shoot that emerges at the right time carries enough structural strength to push through whatever is above it, including soil that was packed by hands that intended it to be impenetrable. Your stem is strong enough now, and the surface cannot hold, type cracking through, if you can feel something pushing upward from inside you right now, a force that the darkness developed and the soil cannot contain. And you know the surface that your barriers packed above you is about to break under the pressure of what they were never supposed to have planted. They tried to bury you, but did not know you were a seed. And the title carries those words because the irony of what your enemies accomplished is the source of the laughter that has been echoing through heaven since the moment the casing cracked open in the soil they selected as your grave. My dear one, the irony is surgical. They hand-selected the conditions that a seed needs to grow. They personally provided the darkness a seed requires for germination. They deliberately applied the pressure a seed depends on for root development. They engineered the isolation a seed uses for focused internal growth. And they did all of it believing they were constructing a tomb when they were constructing an incubator. The gardener is laughing because the enemies did his planting for him. My beloved child, this is directly connected to your specific story. The people who moved against you did not stumble into burying you. They strategized. They calculated. They identified the specific combination of actions that would remove you from their landscape most effectively. And every calculation they made, every strategic decision about how to press you beneath visibility, was simultaneously the exact agricultural protocol the gardener would have prescribed for the seed they did not know they were handling. Their strategy became my recipe, and the recipe is producing exactly what they feared. The thing they were trying to prevent by burying you is the exact thing the burial is producing. They pressed you down to stop your influence. The roots that grew in the pressing will sustain an influence that outlasts theirs by generations. They covered you to end your visibility. The shoot that is breaking through the surface will produce a visibility that their covering made possible by forcing the seed into the growth process it needed. My child, their worst fear is your emerging form, and the emerging is happening because of what they did, not despite it. The surface crack is widening, the shoot is pressing harder, and the soil they packed with such confidence is losing its grip on a force that was never supposed to stay underground. The shoot has reached the surface, and the soil is separating right now. And what is about to emerge into the light for the first time since the burial will be unrecognizable to every person who remembers what was pressed into the ground. My beloved child, I need you to feel the moment, the physical, spiritual, identity-level sensation of something that has been developing in total darkness, pushing through the last layer of resistance and encountering light for the first time. The transition from soil to air, from invisible to visible, from buried to emerged, from what they put in the ground to what the ground produced. The transition is happening right now, and it changes everything. The seed that was pressed into the soil was one thing. What is emerging from the soil is something entirely different. That is the part your enemies did not account for. That seeds do not emerge as seeds. They emerge as something the seed was carrying inside its casing that could only be released through the process of burial, germination, root development, and upward growth. My dear one, you are not coming back as what they buried. You are coming back as what the burial released. The version of you that was pressed into darkness and the version of you that is breaking through the surface are not the same entity. They share the same origin. They carry the same name. But the process that occurred between the burial and the emergence transformed the seed into something the casing could not have predicted, and the buriers could not have imagined. Everything has been building toward this emergence. The root development, the stem strengthening, the casing cracking, the shoot ascending through layers of soil that grew less dense with every inch because the packed surface could not maintain its compression against a force that was growing stronger as it rose. The final layer is yielding. The light is about to touch you for the first time since the hands pressed you down. Type emerging if you can feel yourself pushing through the last layer of what was placed on top of you, and you know that what is about to surface is not the person they buried, but the thing the person was carrying that only the burial could have released. The seed just broke through the surface, and God is laughing because the first thing the light touches is exactly what the buriers spent the burial trying to prevent from ever existing. My beloved child, this is the moment the soil parts, the moment the darkness releases its grip, the moment the first green evidence of what the burial actually produced pierces through the packed earth and stands in open air for the first time, visible, alive, undeniable, and shaped into the precise form that the hands which buried the seed were trying to ensure the world would never see. They tried to bury you. They did not know you were a seed, and the seed just proved it. I need you to feel what is happening to your identity right now. The version of you that went into the ground, the person who was pressed beneath relevance by deliberate hands carrying deliberate intent, that version completed its purpose the moment the casing cracked open in the soil. The casing was never the point. What the casing carried was the point. And what the casing carried has been developing in the dark into something so different from what was buried that the surface it is now breaking through will not recognize it as the same entity. You went in as what they handled. You are coming up as what they feared. The laughter echoing through heaven right now is the sovereign amusement of a gardener watching the most ironic harvest in spiritual history unfold in real time. The very people who provided the darkness, the pressure, the isolation, and the covering that a seed requires for maximum growth are about to watch the results of their own agricultural work emerge from the ground they intended as a permanent grave. They are going to see you, my child, standing in the light, green, alive, growing at a rate that the duration of the burial funded, rooted at a depth that the weight they placed on you established, producing exactly what they spent the burial trying to make impossible. And God is laughing, not at them, at the mathematics of a kingdom where every weapon formed against you becomes the instrument of your becoming. Now that the seed has broken the surface, everything about the burial is being retroactively reinterpreted, and the reinterpretation changes the story from tragedy to strategy, my dear child. This is what happens when a seed emerges from soil that was intended as a grave. The narrative flips, completely, instantly. What was read as destruction becomes cultivation. What was mourned as loss becomes planting. What was interpreted as the end of the story becomes the inciting event that produced the most significant chapter in the entire narrative. Your burial just became your origin story. And origin stories are not tragedies. They are launch pads. The darkness that surrounded you for months is being reclassified. Under the old narrative, it was evidence of abandonment, proof that the people who buried you won, and the God who allowed it was either absent or complicit. Under the new narrative, the one the emergence just authored, the darkness was the germination chamber that a master gardener required to produce what the light alone could never have developed. My beloved child, what the darkness produced in you could not have been produced in the light. That is the reinterpretation the emergence demands. The weight they placed on top of you is being reclassified. It was not oppression. It was the compression that forced your roots downward with a depth and a density that surface planting could never achieve. The root system you now carry, the underground network of resilience, discernment, strength, and spiritual infrastructure that the burial developed, that system would not exist without the exact weight your enemies applied, with the exact force they calculated would keep you down permanently. Their calculated force became your root depth, and root depth determines height. The isolation that cut you off from the world above the surface is being reclassified as the focused incubation period that allowed the seed to develop without the interference of an environment that would have diluted the growth by dividing the seed's attention between becoming and performing. You stopped performing, and the seed used the energy that performance was consuming to grow. Type origin story if you are watching the narrative of your burial flip in real time. Darkness becoming germination, weight becoming root depth, isolation becoming incubation, and the tragedy you lived through is being rewritten as the origin story of what is now standing in the light. Let me show you what is growing from the soil. Now that the seed has broken through, and the roots beneath the surface are feeding a growth the terrain has never witnessed, my dear one. The first thing that is visible above the surface is height. Not the height of the person who was buried. That height was human, limited, proportional to the body that carried it. The height emerging from the soil is the height of what the seed was always designed to produce. A structure so much taller than what went into the ground that the comparison between the two will, Make the buriers question whether they are seeing the same entity. You are not coming back at the same level you were removed from. You are coming back above it. The growth rate is the part that will confuse everyone watching, because a seed that germinates after an extended burial does not grow at a normal pace. It grows at the pace of stored energy being released through a root system that was developed to support rapid expansion. The months of underground development, the root building, the stem strengthening, the internal preparation that was invisible to everyone above the surface. All of that stored developmental energy is now being converted into visible growth at a rate that defies every natural timeline. My beloved child, what took others years to build above the surface is going to appear on your stem in months, because your underground season pre-built the infrastructure that above-ground building normally requires. The fruit is forming before the world expects it. Not eventually, rapidly. Because a seed that breaks through after the burial you endured does not waste a single day above the surface. It has been developing its productive capacity underground and arrives at the surface, already loaded with the potential that other growth forms spend years building from scratch. Your first fruit will arrive before your enemies believe you have been out of the ground long enough to produce it. And the premature fruit will be the evidence that the burial was not wasted time, but accelerated development. People are going to witness the emergence and struggle to reconcile what they are seeing with what they remember being buried, my beloved child. The ones who knew you before the burial, who remember the version that was pressed into the ground, who watched the hands that did it, who perhaps even participated in the packing of the soil or stood by while the covering happened without intervening. Those people are going to see something growing in the exact location where something was buried, and the cognitive dissonance between what they remember going down and what they are watching come up will produce a confusion that only the gardener can explain. They buried a person. A tree is emerging, and no one can reconcile the two without accepting the seed. My child, your enemies are going to experience a specific kind of discomfort that has no natural remedy. The discomfort of watching the consequences of their own actions produce the opposite of their intended outcome. They will look at your growth and know in their bones that the soil it is growing from is the soil they pressed you into. They will trace the location. They will remember the burial and the unavoidable conclusion that their act of destruction became the act of cultivation that produced what is now standing taller than they are, will sit in their awareness like a verdict they cannot appeal. Their burial, your emergence, same soil, opposite outcomes. Connections that could not form while you were underground are going to begin growing alongside you. There are people whose roots were waiting in adjacent soil for a seed in your specific location to break the surface, because their growth was wired to activate alongside yours in a formation the gardener planted simultaneously. Your emergence triggers their emergence, and the landscape that your enemies thought they cleared by burying you is about to be covered with growth so dense and so connected that the terrain they tried to control becomes unrecognizable beneath the canopy of what the burial produced. Type their soil if you believe the people who buried you are about to witness what grew from the exact soil they pressed you into, and the emergence will force them to confront the reality that their act of destruction produced the most significant growth the terrain has ever seen. I need you to understand why I allowed the burial rather than preventing it, my beloved child. Because the allowing reveals something about what I saw inside you that the barriers could never have recognized. I saw the seed before the hands moved against you, before the strategy was formed, before the first conversation was held between the people who would eventually coordinate your removal. I looked at you and saw what was locked inside your casing, the potential, the purpose, the calling, the assignment that was fully formed in the shell of a person who had not yet encountered the conditions required to crack the casing open and release it. The casing was never going to open above ground. That is the truth I knew, and you did not. My child, some seeds germinate in light, some seeds germinate in darkness. The difference is not about the seed's quality. It is about the specific internal composition of what the seed carries. What was locked inside you required the precise environmental conditions that only burial produces. Darkness for focus, pressure for root depth, moisture for casing softening, isolation for undistracted development. Above-ground conditions would have kept your casing intact indefinitely. And a seed with an intact casing never becomes what it was designed to produce. I allowed the burial because I am a gardener who knows his seeds, and I knew yours required the ground. I chose you for this specific process because the thing you carry inside your casing is not a flower that needs gentle conditions and surface planting. It is a tree, and trees require the deepest burial, the longest germination, the most extensive root development, and the most forceful emergence of any seed in the gardener's inventory. My dear one, you were not given a flower's process because you are not carrying a flower's assignment. The duration of your burial, the depth of your darkness, the weight that was placed above you, all of it was proportional to the magnitude of what the gardener saw, locked inside a casing that the buriers mistook for the whole thing. The casing was never you. What is emerging is. The doubt forming right now is the last defense of an identity that was built in the soil, and it is whispering that what is emerging will be pushed back down again, my child. It sounds like this. They buried me once, and they can bury me again. What is emerging is visible now, and visible means targetable. The same hands that pressed me into the ground the first time will see the shoot and reach for it before it has time to grow strong enough to withstand another assault. Coming up only means providing them another opportunity to put me back down. That doubt is using the logic of the burial against the biology of the seed, and the biology wins. My beloved child, a seed that has germinated and broken the surface cannot be reburied. That is not a motivational statement. It is botany. Once the casing has cracked, the roots have anchored, the stem has strengthened, and the shoot has broken the surface. The organism that exists above ground is no longer a seed. It is a plant, and plants do not respond to burial the way seeds do. A plant that is covered with soil pushes through it. A plant whose stem is pressed sideways grows around the obstruction. A plant that is cut above the surface regenerates from a root system that the cutting cannot reach. You are no longer a seed, and the rules that govern the burial no longer apply. The people who buried you handled a seed. What is standing in the light now is not a seed. It is the product of the seed, structurally different, biologically advanced, equipped with systems the seed did not possess. The hands that buried a seed do not have the agricultural knowledge or the physical capacity to handle what the seed became. They knew how to bury what you were. They have no strategy for what you have become. Type cannot rebury if the doubt just tried to convince you that what happened before can happen again. And you now understand that what emerged from the soil is not the seed they buried, but a living structure they do not have the capacity to handle. During every moment